Well, good morning, everybody. So last week, as you recall, Deacon Frank began our homily series, Breathing Room. And he told us that breathing room is that space to breathe in our lives, space to think and to pray, to love, to appreciate beauty, and that life is just better when we have breathing room in it. To continue this reflection, a little exercise for you. If you have one of these little devices, I invite you to pull it out. I know I go against all the convention there, because we always tell you to put them away when you show up to church, right? But I'm asking you to pull them out. It's okay if the priest asks you, you're not going to HE double toothpick. And I know more than you of you. There you go. All right, we're going to pull them out, and you're going to unlock the screens. And I want you to open up first one of the social media apps. And if you're on Facebook, just check in to St. Mary's. We have a page in there. Check in. Let people know where you are. If you don't have Facebook, take a picture and post it on Instagram or Snapchat or text somebody. All right? Let them know where you are right now. John Paul II said that the greatest tool in sharing faith, in evangelizing, is witnessing to the faith ourselves, letting people know who we are. And breathing room helps us recognize those opportunities, as simple as they are, just to let our friends know, hey, we're at church. This is who we are and why it's important for us. So I invite you to do that. Now, know if you checked on the Facebook page, because I get the notifications on that. That's how I'm going to take attendance from now on. You check who's checked in through those social media devices. But once you finish doing that, and if you already have, I want you to scroll through some of the apps to see what you have on your phone. The things that perhaps you use to socialize with, like social media or the word games or other activities like that, or some of the other things that are meant to help make life a little bit easier. For example, my calendar's on here. Lets me know what's going on, right? It'll suddenly pop up little notifications. You have a meeting, you have an appointment, you have to be there, so and so. And the great thing is, if I lose the phone, well, that's not a great thing, but if I lose the phone, I can still go to my computer, right? I can go to the tablet. I can still access my calendar. It wasn't that long ago that everything went into the appointment book. And if you lost the appointment book, you're going to have a very, very bad day, right? Because you weren't going to get that information. You knew there's things in there, contacts or appointments, that we were going to forget about. There's a lot of things we can do on these little devices that make life easier. We can do our banking. We can pay our bills. We can communicate with family and friends throughout the world. We can pray. I won't do a show of hands, but I'm sure you all have the parish app on your phones, right? So you can learn more about our faith, right? And pray with some of the resources that are on there. There's great things that these little devices can do. But there are some drawbacks, aren't there? One of the great things about phones is they make us easily accessible. The biggest drawback of phones, they make us easily accessible, right? Anyone at any time can get a hold of us. We can be barraged by phone calls, by push notifications, by text messages, messenger notifications, so on and so forth, that we spend all of our time trying to catch up on it all. We know that the lighting from these screens and the high definition of these screens have a negative impact on sleeping, right? And that can have a big impact on our breathing room and finding time to relax, to recharge the batteries. Even in our times of relaxing or praying or in the quiet, that can be taken away quickly with a phone call or a text. As great as technology is, it can very quickly take away that little breathing room we have in life. And believe it or not, even though it's pretty advanced, we could still end up like the children of Israel in the first reading, or either of the brothers in the gospel. In the first reading, the Lord points out that the people have turned from Him. They've created their own God. Well, how did this occur? They had become overwhelmed with the stresses in their journey in the desert. They were filled with anxiety, and as a result, they lost sight of their goal. They knew that they were on an incredibly difficult journey, but had grown unsure about why they were on it. Other people they encountered weren't on this journey, and they seemed to be doing pretty well. They lost sight of who they were and what they were about. Doesn't that happen in our lives? If we lose that breathing room, we become overwhelmed and anxious and stressful. And we create our own gods in life to try and give us focus. And the more we do that, the more overwhelmed we can be. Take the parable of the prodigal son. Both brothers have become focused on themselves. One focused on having a good time to the extent that he walks away from everyone and everything in his life. He asked for his share of the inheritance, in essence telling his father in that culture, I wish you were dead, I'd be better off. And when everything was about him, he had no breathing room in his life. And at first it didn't seem to matter. He was having a good time. But it results in him losing everything. And take the older brother. Now, as an older brother, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I always thought this scripture to be scriptural evidence that the youngest gets away with everything. Right? Here was a prime case of it in the Gospels. And yet a quick reflection discovers that the older brother had some issues here too. He gives up breathing room for all the responsibility. Work becomes his drug, his addiction. His focus is the same as his younger brother, himself. And like his younger brother, that lack of breathing room initially doesn't seem to matter. Things are getting done, and perhaps he's even being praised for the things that are getting done. Yet the lack of breathing room prevents him from loving others, prevents him from showing compassion and family to his family, and keeps the focus in on himself. How often do we resemble one or more of these in our own lives? How often do we give up breathing room to try and get things done? I am part of Generation X, a part of that generation in the 80s that were referred to as the latchkey kids. Everyone heard that term before? Because we were the generation for the first time that in large numbers were going home where there wasn't anybody home after school. Either both parents were working or single parents and the single parent was working. So we were given the key to the kingdom. After school, we went home and unlocked the door and were given lists of what we were supposed to do to stay out of trouble, right? Towards the end of my generation into the millennials, there's kind of as a reaction to that, a trend began that family became the main priority. In the millennials particularly, nothing gets in the way of family, and that's good. Making breathing room in your life for family is important and everyone involved. The problem was, in many cases, that goes to an extreme, where every moment is scheduled. As Deacon Frank mentioned last week, that becomes a problem with breathing room, right? Because we're quickly running around from sports to dance to drama to this to that to whatever else that we have to get done. I saw it play out this weekend. Faith formation began in our parish, and yesterday morning I was going over there between the switching of the two sessions, and you had kids arriving or leaving. They're in their soccer outfits and their karate outfits or other sporting events, and they were all talking about, well, this afternoon I'm going to this party, and we're doing this, and we're going to do that, so on and so forth. All kinds of exciting things going on. And I also noticed a lot of moms and a lot of dads and a lot of grandparents looking, well, a little frazzled, because they were the ones shuffling everybody to all these different events, right? And more than a few of them were on the phones coordinating the drop-off and pickup of multiple children at multiple locations throughout southeastern Massachusetts. I think it was a more complicated operation than many military operations that take place in our world. And in one case, one mom's phone rang, and she cringed before she answered it, because this could be the wrench that throws that whole works out of whack, right? And just the stress of what's going to happen now. Now, none of these activities are bad, and they're good, and it's good that we're involved in them and our children are involved in them. But like our technology, too much of anything is detrimental. We may come to a point out of exhaustion, out of frustration, or facing health issues when we reach a breaking point. We just can't do it anymore. Perhaps like the younger son, we've just bottomed out. We recognize not only the need for breathing room, but that we need help to make such room in our lives. Well, if we continue reading on that first reading to the verses that follow, we'd hear Moses do just that he's going to help refocus the people's attention. He'll help them to restore their relationship with the Lord, to create breathing room so that they may continue to persevere in their journey to the promised land. And sometimes we may realize, as the younger son in the gospel does, that the people we need to help us are the same ones that we've hurt. He had turned from his father in a very cruel way. He had abandoned his family. He had been so focused on himself that he didn't recognize the hurt that he caused. And when he does recognize it, in humility, he turns to his father. He seeks forgiveness. He seeks help and pledges to do better by changing his life, knowing he could only do all that with his father's mercy, compassion, love, and help. While these examples relate to situations in our lives, they also speak about our relationship with the Lord. Last week, if you recall, the gospel began by Jesus saying, "If anyone comes to me without hating his father and mother, his wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." And if you recall, Deacon Frank told us that what was being said was that we need to put our relationship with Christ first, above all things. And when we do, we become more loving. Our relationships become more loving and more fulfilling. The liturgy is telling us this week that we need breathing room in our lives for our relationship with God. Otherwise, we forget about Him. Our actions say to the Lord, "I don't care about you. I don't have time for you. I don't need you." And when we realize what we've done, we realize that not only do we need the Lord's forgiveness, but we need His help. The liturgy is telling us that God sees the contrition in our hearts, and filled with love and compassion, He forgives us. He restores us to our relationship with Him. He helps us to continue to grow in that relationship. In order to do so, we need to intentionally create that breathing room in our lives so we don't live life focused on ourselves or lose sight of who we are or what we're about. Life is not meant to be lived on our own. That's not just a religious reality. The ancient Greeks got that. Aristotle, human beings are by nature social beings, meaning we need others not just to survive, but to thrive and flourish. And the gospel this weekend is telling us that we need the Lord in our life, not just to survive, but to thrive and to flourish. We need God to sustain us, to help us to persevere through life in a way that allows us to live life true to ourselves. We need God in order to be more loving, to be more joyful, and to find the fulfillment that we seek in life.